The rain had started early that morning, washing the small town of Maplewood in silver sheets. By noon, the sky hung low and gray, and the scent of wet earth lingered in the air. On the outskirts of town, a narrow road wound between open fields and tall trees, leading to a quiet little house that looked as though it had been forgotten by time. Inside that house lived an old man named Samuel Everett. His life had grown small, measured not by days but by routines. He woke up to the ticking of the clock on the mantel, brewed himself a cup of coffee that always went cold before he finished it, and spent hours by the window watching the road that stretched into the distance. It was the same road his daughter, Emily, had taken 15 years ago when she'd left home after their last fight. He had said words that day he could never take back. She had slammed the door, and her car had disappeared down that same winding road. And for 15 years, that road had been both his torment and his hope. It wasn't that he hadn't tried to reach out, he had. Letters written and never sent, phone calls started and ended in silence, holidays spent staring at the empty chair across the table. But pride is a stubborn thing, and regret even more so. Now, at 72, Samuel found himself talking to the walls, to the clock, to the memory of a girl who had once hugged him every morning before school. He talked to her picture on the mantel, a faded photograph of Emily at 20, her eyes bright with the same stubborn light that once filled his own. "Guess you're doing well out there," he muttered one rainy afternoon, touching the edge of the frame. "Probably forgot all about your old man." But deep inside, he hoped she hadn't. That afternoon, something strange happened. As the rain fell harder and the wind pressed against the windows, Samuel heard a faint knock on the door. He wasn't expecting anyone, visitors had long stopped coming. He frowned, stood up slowly, his joints protesting, and shuffled to the door. When he opened it, he didn't see anyone, only a soaked envelope sitting on the porch, weighed down by a small rock. There was no return address, only his name written in neat cursive, Samuel Everett. He brought it inside, peeled off the wet outer layer, and opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Dear Mr. Everett," it began. "My name is Sarah. I work at the Oak Ridge Community Center downtown. I've been helping a young boy named Noah, who recently joined our after-school art program. He's a sweet, quiet kid, about 7 years old. When we asked the children to draw their families, Noah drew a man sitting by a window with a road leading to a house. He said it was Grandpa Sam. He said his mom talks about you sometimes. Her name is Emily." Samuel's breath caught. The paper trembled in his hands. It took him several moments to sit down, the letter still open on his lap. He read it again and again, his eyes blurring with something more than age. Emily had a son. His grandson. And somewhere, not too far away, she was talking about him. He set the letter on the table and stared out the window, his heart pounding. Could it really be true? Could she still think of him after all these years? For days, he carried that letter everywhere he went, folded neatly in his shirt pocket. He'd take it out sometimes, tracing the words with his fingers, memorizing every detail. Then one morning, he decided to go to Oak Ridge himself. He hadn't driven in years, but the old truck started on the third try. The road was the same as it had always been, winding, narrow, and lined with memories. As he approached the town center, his nerves began to twist in his stomach. He didn't know what he'd say. He just knew he had to go. When he arrived at the community center, children were running about, laughing and painting at small tables. He stood by the door, uncertain, until a woman approached him. "Can I help you?" she asked kindly. "I got a letter," he said, holding out the paper. "From a woman named Sarah." She smiled gently. "That would be me. You must be Mr. Everett." He nodded. "Is Noah here?" Sarah's expression softened. "Yes, he's in the art room. Would you like to meet him?" Samuel's voice caught in his throat. I don't want to scare him." I just want to see him. Through the open doorway, Samuel saw a small boy sitting at a table, coloring a picture of a house. His hair was dark and slightly messy, his expression focused. And when he lifted his head for a moment, Samuel saw something familiar, the same spark in his eyes that Emily once had. It was like seeing time fold in on itself. Sarah noticed his trembling hands. Would you like me to tell his mother you're here? He nodded slowly. That night, Emily sat in her small apartment, reading a note Sarah had left on her desk after work. Her heart skipped as she reached the line that said, "Your father came by today." She put the note down, her fingers shaking. She hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in years. For a moment, she thought about ignoring it, about letting the silence continue. But then she looked over at Noah, asleep on the couch with a blanket half draped over him, his drawing of Grandpa Sam resting on the floor. She picked up the drawing and traced the lines. A man, a house, a long road. Maybe it was time. The next morning, she drove. The road stretched out like a memory she tried too long to forget. Every turn brought back something, a laugh, a slammed door, a quiet dinner after her mother died. And finally, the moment she'd left, her father's angry voice chasing her down the driveway. When she reached the house, she parked at the edge of the gravel drive. The paint on the porch was chipped, and the curtains fluttered faintly through the open window. She hesitated, her heart pounding, and then she saw him. Samuel stood in the doorway, as though he'd known she was coming. He looked older, frilier, but when his eyes met hers, the years melted away. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then he took a step forward. "Emily," he said softly. Her name broke like a prayer. She swallowed hard. "Hi, Dad." The word hung in the air, familiar yet foreign. "I didn't know if you'd ever come back," he whispered. "I didn't either," she said, her voice trembling. "But Noah, he wanted to meet you. He drew you, Dad. He knew who you were before I even told him." Something in Samuel's face cracked open. His voice wavered. He's a good boy." "The best," she said, smiling faintly. "He loves to draw. Just like Mom did." He nodded, blinking back tears. "You still remember your mother's laugh?" Emily's eyes glistened. "Every day." They stood there in the quiet rain, the years of distance folding between them like pages in a book. Then Noah climbed out of the car, his small voice cutting through the air. "Mom? Is that Grandpa Sam?" Samuel froze. He turned toward the boy, his heart aching at the sound of that word, Grandpa. Emily nodded to her son. "Yes, sweetheart. This is Grandpa." Noah smiled shyly and walked up the steps, holding out a folded piece of paper. "I drew you another picture," he said. Samuel took it with trembling hands. It was a drawing of 3 figures standing in front of a house, an old man, a woman, and a boy, beneath a bright yellow sun. "It's us," Noah said proudly. Samuel's throat closed. He bent down, placing a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "It's beautiful," he whispered. "Thank you." Emily watched as the two of them stood together. The man she'd once thought she'd lost forever, and the son who'd unknowingly brought him back. Later that evening, the 3 of them sat around the old kitchen table. The same table where so many arguments had once begun. But now, it was covered in colored pencils, drawings, and the sound of laughter. Emily looked at her father, really looked at him. The wrinkles around his eyes, the way his hands shook slightly as he poured Noah a glass of milk. She realized then that time had not been unkind, it had simply waited. When Noah went to bed that night in the spare room, Samuel and Emily lingered in the quiet. "I was angry for so long," she said finally. "But I missed you every day." Samuel nodded, his eyes wet. "I was proud, too proud. I thought if I reached out, you wouldn't want to hear from me." I thought, love wasn't enough to fix what I broke. Emily reached across the table and took his hand. Love isn't about being perfect, Dad. It's about coming back. Even if it takes the long way home. He let out a shaky breath, squeezing her hand tightly. Outside, the rain had stopped. The moonlight fell softly on the road that led away from the house, the same road that had once taken Emily away, and now had brought her back. In the following weeks, the rhythm of the house began to change. The mornings were no longer silent, they were filled with the chatter of Noah's questions and Emily's laughter. Samuel found himself waking earlier just to make breakfast for them. He fixed the squeaky porch swing, taught Noah how to plant sunflowers in the yard, and rediscovered how much warmth could fit inside a small home. And on quiet evenings, when the sun sank low and the crickets began to sing, he would sit on the porch, watching the long road disappear into the trees. He no longer waited for someone to come home. Because love, he'd learned, doesn't always travel fast, it just never stops trying. Sometimes it takes the long way home. And when it finally arrives, it fills every empty corner it once left behind. So when Emily came out one evening, resting her hand on his shoulder and smiling softly, he looked up at her and said the words he'd held for 15 years. "I'm sorry, sweetheart." She nodded, her eyes shining. "I know, Dad. And I'm home." They sat there together, the air quiet but full of peace. The past hadn't disappeared, it had simply softened, like the rain on the old wooden steps. And as the stars began to appear above the fields, Samuel Everett finally understood something that had taken a lifetime to learn. Love never gets lost. It just sometimes takes the long way home.